Greetings, welcome back to CS133, Practical Programming with Python. We're on week 2 of Loops and Logic, and this is the else-if lesson. So basically the last lesson in our logic series. As promised from last lecture, this is how we figure out what happens if it's not true, right? If it's not true, obviously it doesn't execute, but what if you wanted to do a certain set of code if it was false? So this gives us some of those capabilities, as well as checking on other scenarios. So, if this, else if this, otherwise do this. So that's kind of what we're going to go over. So again, our goal is to understand how to compare these values multiple times, not just multiple values, but multiple times against different scenarios. So our success criteria is you'll create an advanced if statement using all the elements in this lesson. So what I mean is we're going to learn else and we're going to learn else if, and you'll use both of those by the end of the lesson. So first things first, we're going to just start with the if else statement. And this is what I mentioned, if this is true, you're going to do this code. If it's false, you're going to do this code. So no matter what, a specialized set of code is going to happen. Now, obviously, any code that's after it is going to be executed. But you want code to execute only if it's false. If the code is outside of the if statement, it's always going to execute. So you want, if it's true, do this. Else is do this, right? Are you over 18? Let you into the movie theater. Else, don't let you into the movie theater, right? You want only one of those two scenarios to return. And this is how the syntax look. If, evaluation, our trusty colon, indentation, and then else. There's no evaluation with else, right? Because if everything above it is false, then it executes. So you're not evaluating anything. So it's just else, colon, indentation, and then do the other code. Now, why don't I just do if true and if false? Well, let's look at this little scenario down here, which also kind of teaches how the if-else statement works. So our goal is to make it so if the light is on, we turn it off. If it's off, we turn it on. So let's look at this first part of the situation where we have just those two if statements. Light is on. If the light is on, we turn it off. And then we go down here, if the light is off, which we just turned it off, we turn it back on. So this is not a very good toggle, right? If it's on, we turn it on, or we turn it off, and then we turn it right back on again. So that is one problem with just using if statements and not using these more specialized pieces of code. So if we look at our test 1, it's on. Now, we set it again, so it's already on. We know it's on. We just set it to on. So let's go into the part 2 of this. If the light is on, turn it off. Else, turn it on. So we know it's on because we just had it on. So we turn it off. And because this is not false, right? This was already true. We don't do this, so it's off. If we were to run this back again, and now that it's off, light is not on, so this is false. So we execute the else and turn it on. So this would be a great toggle concept. So again, there is many reasons for using it. I only execute if it's true, and then only execute this code. And a lot of the times, it's because of this method of you might do something in this if statement that is going to just make you execute this if statement. However, and this is an important concept about all of these advanced if statements, the very first thing that's true is executed, and then everything else is ignored. Everything else is ignored. So you might have if, else if, else, and many, and then else. It's the very first thing that's true. And so this whole thing is the if statement. Right? This is just the if and then else part of it, but the whole entire thing is one statement. So let's look at this next piece, which is the else if, and then how you write it in Python. So we have if false, it will not execute this code. Else if true, and again, see how it's elif true, still have our colons. This will execute. Elif true. Now this will not even be evaluated. right? The whole point of this one statement is the very first thing that's true, that's what's going to execute. So again, and I'll show you in a second how you can make your code so you can't actually get to certain parts of the code as you're writing it. So if false, else if true, this will execute. It's the very first one that's true. So if this was true, it would execute and ignore everything else. So we're gonna look at another piece of code in a second, but I want to point out real quick that you can have an if, else if, you can have an if, else statement, and you can have if, else statement, which is about, I think, what we're going to see in a second. They don't, if you have a if statement, you don't need an else statement. If you have an if, else if statement, you don't need an else statement. It all depends on what you're trying to do with your code. That's really important to understand. Like a lot of this stuff, it depends on what you're trying to do with your code, whether it's quote unquote needed or not. So let's look at this. I'm going to make this full screen because this one has got a lot going on with it. So is happy is true, is crazy is false currently. So if is happy, else if not, remember whatever that is the opposite of it. Else if is happy and is crazy, and then this is if all of these are false, you're going to get none of the above. So let's look at it. We have true, if is happy, and you can see already I'm loving it, right? So if you're happy, I'm loving it, done and done. So let's go ahead and change that to false. So, because otherwise, as long as that's true, we're going to execute that first one and never get to anything else. So let's do this one false. So since this is false, this is not going to execute. Else if not is crazy is false, but not is crazy is true, true. So, right, so this is false, so not false is true. It's going to execute and not go any further. So let's test that out, right? Let's test our theory. Yep, crazy people don't know they're crazy. I know that I'm crazy, therefore I'm not crazy. Isn't that crazy? Extra points if you know what that's from. So, again, this is true, not false is true. So let's change this one to true, and this is going to be still false. Not true is false, so these are both false. Is happy and is crazy, so this is false and this is true, but remember, and you need both, so this should print else. None of the above. Correct. Alright, well let's make it true and true. Now, which one do you think is going to execute, right? Which one do you think is going to execute with true and true? Well, trick question, it's the first one, right? That's kind of the whole point of this. With the current way we wrote the code, we can never get to this, right? We can never get to this statement because this is true first, so it's never going to get here. Now, I could take this code, move it up, and then I should be able to get to everything because nothing overlaps after that point. But this is a great example of not having your code in the right order. So I can never get to this because as soon as is happy is true, this executes, and this needs to be true in order for it to execute. So great example of needing to have stuff in the right order, along with how to use the else if else statement. Again, they don't all need to be together. I don't need an if else if. I can have as many elifs as I need, and I don't need an else unless you need it. So that is it for adding the if else if statements. Remember, it's elif for else if. And then another good point, I see a lot of students confuse, elif does need, so if it has the word if in it, it does need the evaluation, right? Is it true or false? So if, is this true or false? Elif, is this true or false? Elif, is this true or false? The else, you're not going to put else false here, right? You don't that will break it. So first of all, but you don't do it because that's implied, right? If all of this is false, then boom, that's what executes. So that's the end of this lesson. We'll see you for the practice next.